I think part of what creates this is sometimes men and women become convinced that they want complete freedom to do whatever they want, and that this is somehow like a God-given right, and that all hierarchies are always oppressive. And so they come to this conclusion about themselves and then start having kids. And then they try to apply that same philosophy on their children. And I think that we have to be really careful about like, okay, what do we really believe? It's okay, that it's so extreme to think that all hierarchy is bad and that there's never a situation in which we need to be led or that we're a part of a community and therefore there is reasonable sacrifices or there's just a differential on either who has authority or who has knowledge or who has wisdom and that sometimes that leadership is really for everyone's benefit. So these are incredibly simplistic ideas that I think people are really buying into all of a sudden, that, oh, we need to live in this hyper individualistic world in which there is no hierarchies, I think is really creating all kinds of strange kind of parenting ideas.
Jeremy, do you think too that it has anything to do with being just American
Right.
and like the idol of freedom that kind of
Yes.
is part
100%.
of what? Okay, yeah,
Yeah. Like even on that reel, if you guys were watching it on YouTube, I think it actually was somehow like it was titled something like, parenting is not a democracy. And
yeah,
I think that democracy is part of what really confuses parenting, and that in a
mhm,
democracy, one of the things that occurs is we've made a decision that even though there is a massive difference when it comes to wisdom, nobody is going to get to rule or lead without my consent, at some level, or at least without majority consent. That's actually, and everyone who studied political science will say that's actually not the best way to do government or leadership, unless there's some kind of massive corrupting influence that you're trying to resist. In other words, if you could wave a magic wand, you actually would want just the most competent people to be in charge. You wouldn't want democracy. You would want something else closer to like monarchy or something. But we don't believe that can happen without it becoming corrupt. And so the next best thing, like Winston Churchill says, democracy is the worst form of government on the planet, with the exception of all the others. And his point is that it breaks down. And so one of the things that Gabor Mate said in that clip is you don't have this authority to suppress or to your children or get your own preferences met. And so there is kind of like a deal being struck between parent and child, and that is the child is going to give all the authority to the parent, or the parent is going to have all the authority over the child. The government's going to admit that, God says that, and has set that hierarchy up with the understanding that the parent has this authority in order to build a thriving situation for that child and for the family. And
yeah,
there are situations that people have been in which the parents have taken control of that power to get their own preferences met. And so there's this incredibly pernicious ideology that all authority exists as basically a power game. And to the extent that you believe that that authority is only about somebody trying to take somebody else's power away and not necessarily lead to some kind of communal thriving or familial thriving or societal thriving, that's all about power, then of course it just everything devolves into, okay, nobody should have power over me. And that's where a lot of these parenting ideas come from. It really, you become convinced that all power is about exerting preferences. And of course, as believers, we know like like you said, there's duty, there's responsibility, there's wisdom, there's a lot of grounding for the authority that is not simply I'm trying to get my preferences met at your expense.